Really? Okay, yeah.
All right.
For vibes.
So big ass node, right? So let's say in this graph we have three people, you, me, and Morgan, right? And we could let's call this E house for now. I know you're not E house, but let's just say it is. Okay. So within E house, here's the thing: we're all very different people. Barton, for example, loves math, but sometimes when he explains his things, we're very confused, right? You're a neuro child, right? But sometimes when you explain neuro, we get confused. Same thing with me and sales or something. I don't know, right? But in general, through whatever it is, there's always going to be differences based on us just being different people.
Mm-hmm.
So part of the way we could solve this is if we had a more sophisticated way to kind of combine both our external thoughts and internal thoughts into a more concrete process. For example, let's say we have something such as we're all roommates. Let's say we run into an issue with who does the dishes, right? So
Practical example, yes.
A very practical example, right?
So the dishes that vibes that low.
Exactly. So in this case, the vibes or the lens will be dishes, right? Because in general, that's the conflict that we're dealing with. So basically, you could think of lens in a very abstract way, right? So let's say we're just talking about, in our context, we're talking about dishes, right? So what basically dishes.vibes.low, what basically do is, based on all our different interactions with, let's say, the dishes situation, it figures out the optimal way for us to deal with the dishes.
You can find alignments. Yeah, the way you do it is combinatorial search, right? And so.
And the way we do it is through that part.
Yes.
The left corner, which is the.
But very simply, yeah, we have different bearings. Different pairings. So you could say, we first could explore Barton and Yo-Yo approach to dishes. Then we could explore Barton and Jesse approach to dishes. There was a third person who becomes this different combinations, and we could find coalitions and hidden consensus. That's not there because we are only thinking about those ways. And so then the idea is, but then we get to the fullest aggregation of everybody into a combined e-house system, which may include people who are around it as well, because that's causally important. Dishes that vibes that low has to already have that as a tree and a subtree and a subgraph or a graph, but kind of sort of a space of possibility. This is what's called as a consensus topos. It's this multi-agent perspective in a generative way, coming together to produce better states of the world as a kind of a projection or a heuristic, like Leslie Lamport would call it prophecy, a kind of object, but it's a refinement map ultimately, and some logical constraint that you try to satisfy through constraints structures.
So consensus basically help us create a consensus on who should wash the dishes. For example, maybe in this case, to translate it back into a practical example, maybe Barton and I agree we don't want to do dishes. Maybe you and I agree Barton should do dishes. And maybe Barton and you agree Barton should probably do the dishes.
And we all agree we don't do the dishes, but we have somebody who must, right?
But someone must. Based on
on
all these different interactions, the system might decide Barton should do the dishes. Right?
Yes.
So basically it's taking all our different interactions.
I think that is a very likely decision.
To basically create a decision on who should do the damn dishes. Right?
Yeah, but if once we're done, we can go to party.vibes.low /e or /the sum, and we could actually have a very different now aspect of our joint co-living, co-vibing being externalized as this moment by moment action reaction reflective surface, you could say, or open dynamical system of how things get done. And we have some resources, and these resources need to be shared and actions taking place. And so that's very generic though, because lens can be what is the craziest lens you can think of?
But isn't lens just the external state with interpretive lens of each person and projects into possible futures based on your explanation?
The way I've been thinking about it, I might be wrong, is it's just about the context of the discussion. I've just been thinking about it in a very generalized sense, but I don't know if that's
So in this case, it's very generally intuitively directionally correct, but I would say it's micro world, or a world.
Micro
supposed to be a simulation of.
Well, I like to say the difference between. So people say, "What do you just call simulation?" That's actually how we brought up before. And I would say the difference is that simulation seems something that's out of the loop. It's off to the side. You do it, and then you actually live in the world here. You do it's like separated. Whereas micro world is in the loop. It's just smaller. It's a smaller version, a smaller model which you reference as an arena that results in co-play. So we talk about play and co-play, so there's open game, play, co-play. Co-play is the response of the world to your interaction. So what's the point of this URI is that each one of us goes to it as a human being, that's the antecedent of this, and interacts with it, effectively injecting kind of information, energy, whatever you call it, gradients of some sort of consensus seeking, or whatever our intent is, right? So then the idea of this lens is to have all the necessary and sufficient antecedents of constructing a good arena, to where the co-play has to always act for the successor state we are trying to predict.
Oh, okay.
In the same way the world would subject to some sort of coherence consistency guarantees like that of symmetric monoidal category.
Okay.
So that's specifically with parallel processing, if you have commutativity and so on. In terms of gluing, we can talk about this pre-sheaves, right? And the result is a sheaf. When we have each of us could be seen as a pre-sheaf combined, we've resolved our differences through gluing axiom, fulfillment, whatever is the section. We verify it's a sheaf, and then the lens is a topos of sheet or pre-sheaves. It's a topos is a world, it's a place, it's a kind of like logical space. As a dynamical system, the system homology of it has to preserve all the necessary, like whatever is covered in this book. Elementary applied topology for Robert Greist. Excellent one. And so all this stuff is here. But I feel like in this case, we're also like indexing information, all that stuff. It's a closed feedback loop cybernetic system.
Okay.
Which,
So.
provided.
Okay, so can I try to articulate the
Please, yes.
Yes, please do.
It's iterative.
Okay, between like micro robotic simulations and
Yes.
from there we go into like the sheaf part, right? So I guess the difference is like maybe in like a simulation, what it would be is just maybe in a simulation game it would just be like maybe we have like this setup, maybe in like some like generated like video game, right? And a video game you have basically me arguing with Barton who picks the cup, right? And then me arguing with Yo-Yo who has to wash the dishes, right? And so on until it goes through all the possibilities, yada yada, to find like the most optimal one. However, the issue with this is that it's removed from reality. At the end of the day, any type of experiment does not actually reflect reality. It's just like
It's a model.
It's a model, right? It's
Yes.
inaccurate. And models, the best models are the ones that evolve with new data. So maybe maybe a better example would be, let's say, a microroad, and I'm sure there's some nuance movement with this, but let's say based on like the clinical simulation, we figure out that in this case, I'm the one who should do dishes. But maybe after I do dishes, I get really unhappy, so that basically this way simulation learns, oh, let me input like just how shit the situation is and add it back to the next simulation. So over time, like the simulated microroad learns from like my experiences.
The tendencies, and so yes. So the idea is that what's the price of anarchy here? The price of anarchy is whatever the system is already doing, which would be like paying somebody. Whoever has more money ends up not doing the dishes, right? And maybe it's sometimes fair, but often it's not fair. And maybe it's so psychologically damaging to somebody who, it's just the last straw for them, right? So you basically create this like understanding of a not easily capturable, but like somehow relational, graphical, and like meaningful ways in which we understand our world and value we add to it. And so maybe since Jesse has a great taste in music, Jesse's contributions to the overall good vibes of the house, previously very difficult to capture, can now be assessed by going to music vibes law or Jesse's music vibes law / the users and seeing how their interaction would happen.
That's good. That's a good example.
Yes.
Like that was a good
Is
example.
this a flipperoo?
Yeah.
It's an emergent focus group,
Okay.
right, around everything. And
Okay, so an interesting question though. How do lens translate to other lenses now? For example,
Well,
how does
precisely.
dishes translate to music?
Yes.
Like, is there a way to
Oh,
like?
that's brilliant.
Yeah.
Okay, so
combine the two?
you have created evolution of this that I should have thought of but haven't. Implicitly, all these lenses are compositional.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
So if you have a lens, in fact, you can do Haskell right now. There's like a lens thing.
But like, I guess
Yeah.
my question is,
Like
is
an
it like
L1
C
plus
plus E plus W?
No, for
like
sure.
lens?
Yeah. So this is joint world models. This is like world models where you add them together and it's supposed to be contiguous. So yeah, this is what the value add of our approach to this, and we're using this like theory of architectures, is to say that whatever properties we had for this space before, when it was just composed of like one or two, we add some new one. The dynamics of this whole thing downstream have to be in this like also in the adversarial setting, right? So somebody else trying to do something the same exact thing. So by simulation, I guess. Difference is that I guess simulation is simulation. Microworld is by simulation.
Yeah.
Right. But by simulation is so different from how you think of like sequential execution of this like time indexed event series to this parallel processing world of, oh gosh, everything is happening everywhere at all times. And so the idea of it, it's supposed to like externalize some dynamics of the world, so you can cloak it in the same way you cloak the world, and you get the same sort of pushback from the world to some sort of thing that you have no choice over what happens. And that's co-play. I like to say that co-play is the feeling of asphalt hitting your face when your world model doesn't include gravity, right?
Huh.
So it's a very brutal one. But the idea of this co-play, it has to hurt. And it has to be about something that matters when you're deciding life and death decisions, or like how to invest finance stuff. So, yeah, this is that. So it's very brutal actually. She's got much friendlier analogy. Co-play is the $0 in your bank account when you fail to sell the shitcoin at the top and now it's worth nothing. So yeah. And then the same thing happening in the world, right? And so the idea is a lot of policy. Yeah, it's also kind of like RL, right? Policy, but little cybernetics. The entire society is doing RL through multi-agent, imperfect information gain perspective, or asymmetric information. So this is about it's construction of meaning. So yes, you can absolutely multiply these lenses.
Is it also just like a cross product?
Yeah, it's literally the monoidal, Tensor monoidal type of thing. And it's interesting to think about what's the difference between add and multiply. This is where this like tropical property, where you replace every multiply with add, and you do every add as a threshold of some kind. And let me say max, measurable. Yeah, so you do max, property is the add. So instead of adding them, you just use the largest one. And then you replace the product operation with sum type operation. Right? So that's what the tropical property is. So tropical vibes, right? Tropical vibes tend to be. Yeah.
I'm just imagining even like one scenario where it's like an interaction between like me and Yo-Yo, right?
Yes.
So even with like two people, there's like so many facets of things, dishes, music, yada yada, and you get expanded.
San Francisco.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So how is this like feasible and like computationally? Right?
Yes, it's literally impossible in terms of like the traditional approaches to modeling, like in a trained test set, whatever, where you have to create like some holdout set and you do like this learning thing. If it's out of distribution, like everything is collapsing. The idea of this is to use a combination of like transformer models with very large weights size plus.
So you just take those like big ass model and you point to the latent space.
To only do inference time stuff and only doing it like in context where you can generalize algebraic structures out of distribution. But transformers cannot do that, provably. But transformers combined with like a Wasserstein type flow, continuous flow type thing, flow matching thing, diffusions, which are equivalent to generative flows, and in some ways in flow matching is what is faster, but yeah. And you can do kernelized normalizing flows as well. But yeah, so if you can see this as kernels, then you just basically also combine kernels. Okay, with generative kernel, which does part of the distribution. And when we look at the distributions like topology, direct topology helps us talk about like connectedness and whether it will like end up in a bad way. And so all this is like sensing, right? In a sense, like objects is the sense control loop. It's like perception action, the perception cognition action loop, right? Similar to that. All of that is just trying to do that kind of thing at every scale. And so lenses of necessity have to be added together because they contain information about the world that we've learned apart. And the whole.
Wait, so you are adding them? I thought you were cross product.
Well, you do. It's join them together, so compose them, right? And compose them, right? Composition is a bit of a cop-out, but yeah, it's Cartesian close composition. And so when you do these things, you don't try to model a person in the computer. That would fail every time. Phenomenology of our conscious states is very much rich. Geometrically, we can compress it very well. Language is like a pointer at things rather than a thing. And so language itself can be used as a means to an end, but it's mostly this emergent compositional property we seek. So the whole point of the system is to provide an interaction-based approach. If you provide an interaction-based